Donald Trump has been out of office for 9 months, yet the effects of his attempted theft of an election, his demonization of those who disagree with him, and his embrace of white nationalism, well, those live on. Trump created a monster within the party he led, normalizing radicalization among Republicans. In Congress, Capitol Police report an unprecedented rise in threats to lawmakers following the January 6th attack. The newly installed chief of U.S. Capitol Police tells the Associated Press he predicts authorities will respond to close to 9,000 threats this year alone. It's even happening at hospitals in Trump country. Hospital in Branson, Missouri, recently forced to equip staff with panic buttons on their badges because assaults on staff tripled over the past year. And then there are school districts across the country facing scenes like this on the regular.
And I'm going to come for everybody that comes at my kid with this stupid, ridiculous mandate.
We know who you are. We know who you are. You can leave freely, but we will find you, and we know who you are. We know who you are.
Joining me now, Jill Wine-Banks, former Watergate special prosecutor, MSNBC contributor, and host of the #Sisters-in-Law podcast, and Frank Figliuzzi, MSNBC national security analyst and former assistant director for counterintelligence at the FBI. He's also the author of The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence. Great to see you both, as always. Frank, what went through my mind as I watched those videos is that you and I often talk about chatter, about the things that are happening on the internet, on encrypted platforms, that the FBI is keeping their ear attuned to. But now you're watching so much of this just spill out into the open. How do you prioritize those threats?
First of all, what the FBI does is they look at imminent threat of violence. And now they've been approached, Alicia, by school board organizations asking for help. Think about this, your local school board, people who simply want to get it right, do their civic duty, volunteer on their own time, now reaching out to the FBI saying, we are being threatened. And now you see the same thing playing out with electoral workers. Just again, people volunteering in their off hours to try to get the local and county election right. And now there's an FBI task force to try and protect those people, with interviews being done by FBI agents of dozens of election officials who have received threats simply for trying to help and volunteer. And now healthcare workers being threatened. Here's the problem. When people who just want to volunteer and do their civic duty end up getting threatened by violent extremists, guess what? The day comes where only violent extremists end up running for those local offices, school board, et cetera. It is a high threat environment we're in. Right.
And we know that there are efforts to recruit people to run against school board members. It is all actually very organized, very concerted. Jill, to pick up on something that Frank said there, right, about the fact that sometimes these are volunteers, they're hospital workers being assaulted while doing their jobs or while trying to volunteer what is already an unbelievably difficult time to be doing that work. You have lots of states that have laws that make it a felony for attacking public workers, like a bus driver, for example. Should there be similarly harsh penalties for those who are convicted of attacking frontline workers? Is that part of where this entire conversation goes next?
Alicia, it's so sad that we have to have this discussion, that we are talking about people ignoring reality, ignoring facts, and attacking or threatening to attack school board members, as you said, nurses, doctors. It is, and election workers, as Frank mentioned. So unfortunately, I think the answer is, unless you penalize people for doing that this may continue. And so, yes, new laws may be necessary, just like a new law is necessary called the Saving Our Democracy or Protecting Our Democracy Act that has been proposed by Adam Schiff as the chief sponsor to codify what were norms that we never expected to be violated. They have been violated, so they need to be put into law with consequences. The same is true for threatening our workers.
Frank, I want to play some more sound of these school board meetings so we can get a sense of just how out of control some of them are getting. Take a listen.
Don't put masks on our kids anymore, because I'm telling you what, I'm a mom who's fearless, and I will come after you.
You're allowing child abuse. You're allowing child abuse. You're allowing child abuse. You're allowing child abuse.
Frank, things have become so scary at these meetings that the organization representing school boards across the country is asking the federal government to help, arguing that the classification of these actions could be the equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism. What might federal assistance for these school boards actually look like if and when it comes?
So, of course, there are already laws in place for assault and threats and cyber stalking and all of that. And what the federal government adds to this picture is intelligence that can be shared with local, county, and state police authorities to say, look, we're seeing this develop. This, and what a sad state of affairs that maybe now the local police need to have a security and response plan for simply having a school board meeting. So I don't want to get to the point where there needs to be another federal law for everything that involves a threat. But where the federal nexus is if indeed this is labeled domestic terrorism, if this is a national movement, then the FBI and federal law enforcement is tailor-made for that kind of national level coordination with state and local police, who quickly will become overwhelmed, Alicia, with overtime, intel gathering at every election board meeting, every school board meeting, every local hospital and clinic that's administering vaccines. This becomes a security crisis, in a sense, for the nation.
Jill, the New York Times editorial board just published an opinion piece talking about how close Donald Trump, his lawyer John Eastman, and their allies really were to pulling off a coup in January. It argues, quote, that leaves all Americans who care about preserving this republic with a clear task: reform the federal election law at the heart of Mr. Eastman's twisted ploy and make it as hard as possible for anyone to pull a stunt like that again. So first, what kind of changes need to happen to our election laws? You talked a little bit about what Congressman Schiff has proposed, and how much of it, to Frank's point about how, we're now reaching a point where there has to be a law on the books about everything in order to preserve norms. How much of this is about addressing this legislatively, and how much of it is culturally reminding people that this is not normal? That I think in the course of this conversation, the three of us have said at least 4 different times how sad it is that we need to be talking about violence against school board members.
Well, you're right on everything that you said. And the Eastman memo is not getting the attention that it needs. I wish everyone would read it, because what it lays out is a horrifying scenario in which, even though you got to cast your ballot, it wasn't going to get counted. It didn't matter what your state voted for. It would be undone by the president of the Senate, who would be the vice president. At that time would have been Pence, ignoring it and putting in a different slate of electors. We cannot allow a law that is vaguely written, the Electoral College Act, to permit that. So I think we do need to take a look at the Electoral College. I personally would like to abolish the Electoral College and go with something like the National Popular Vote Compact that would avoid having to amend the Constitution to allow states to vote in a way that gives people the representation that they voted for. Every vote has to count, and that's what my pin says, is count every vote. So we're in deep trouble if we don't change the law.
I love that you got around to put a pin in it, knowing that I might not have the time. Frank Figliuzzi, Jill Wine-Banks, as always, thank you both.